Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girdharadhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girdharadhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jayo Radha Giridhari Radha Giridhari Radhe Jai Jagannath Jagannath Jaya Baladeva Jaya Subhaja Jaya Giri Govardhan Giri Govardhan Giri Govardhan Jaya Giri Govardhan Jaya Gauranitai 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 Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jai Vishnu Paramahamsa Parivrajakacharya Astatana Sata Shri Srimad Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're continuing our reading from the fourth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 8, Dhruva Maharaj leaves home, text 6. Atata kirtaye vamsham punya kirte kurudvaha svayambhuvasya manor harir amsham shajanmana Athata kirtaye vamsham punya kirte kurutvaha svayambhuvasya pimanur harir amsham shajanmana. Atata kirtaye vamsham punya kirte kurutvaha svayambhuvasya pimanur harir amsham shajanmana. And the word for word. Ata, now. Ata, hereafter. Kirtaye, I shall describe. Vamsham, dynasty. Punya kirte, celebrated for virtuous activities. Kuru udvaha, O best of the Kurus. Swayambhuvasya, of Swayambhuva. Api, even. Mano, of the Manu. Hare, of the personality of Godhead. Amsha, plenary expansion. Amsha, part of. Janmana, born of. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Translation. Maitreya continued, O best of the Kuru dynasty, I shall now describe before you the descendants of Swayambhuva Manu, who was born of a part of the plenary expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport. Lord Brahma is a powerful expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Although Brahma is Jiva Tattva, he is empowered by the Lord, and therefore he is considered a plenary expansion of the Supreme Godhead. Sometimes it happens that when there is no suitable living being to be empowered to act as Brahma, the Supreme Lord himself appears as Brahma. Brahma is the plenary expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and Swayambhuva Manu was the direct son of Brahma. The great sage Maitreya is now going to explain about the descendants of this Manu, all of whom are widely celebrated for their pious activities. Before speaking of these pious descendants, Maitreya has already described the descendants of impious activities, representing anger, envy, unpalatable speech, quarrel, fear, and death. Purposely, therefore, he is next relating the history of the life of Dhruva Maharaj, the most pious king within this universe. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So thank you again for the opportunity to try and speak some words from the Srimad Bhagavatam from our previous acharyas. If we can repeat a little bit of what they say, then our life and our words are perfect. And now we've ended the pastime with Daksha, and we're heading into the pastime with Dhruva Maharaj. In these interim few verses that we've heard over the last few days, we've heard of the sons of Lord Brahma, some of the sons of Lord Brahma. And at first we heard of the great sages who were born, who then stayed brahmachari before Kumaras, Narada Muni. We heard about these great personalities. And now we will begin to hear about the other sons of Lord Brahma. And today we're hearing about Swayambhuva Manu. And Srila Prabhupada in the purport, he describes that we're heading into this very pious description of Dhruva Maharaj, one of the descendants of Swayambhuva Manu. And just previously, we've heard about the impious descendants. And so now, because we've heard of that, so we've heard of the great sages, then we've heard of the impious descendants. Prabhupada says descendants of impious activities. So we've heard about that. And now we're going on to hear about the pious descendants of Swayambhuva Manu. And it's the pastimes of Dhruva Maharaj, I'm sure we're all familiar with, are very, very wonderful. And this is a testimony to the greatness of Swayambhuva Manu. Now, in the sati, just sit nicely if you want to sit. Sit. Just sit. Just sit. Okay. Sit. So, sorry. So, Swayambhuva Manu is a direct son of Lord Brahma. He is described as a part of the plenary expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada describes that Lord Brahma, because he is specifically empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is described as a plenary expansion because he is specifically empowered to create. And as we hear Srila Prabhupada's explanation, that Lord Brahma, he is Jiva Tattva. Generally, the most qualified living entity takes the role of Lord Brahma. However, if there is no unsuitable, then the Supreme Lord himself does occasionally take the post of Lord Brahma. So Swayambhuva Manu, he's born directly from Lord Brahma. And we hear both the names of Lord Brahma and Swayambhuva Manu included in our in this wonderful verse from Yamaraj in the 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, describing the 12 Mahajans, the authorities of devotional service. So they're both included there. Swayambhur Narada Shambhu, Kapilo Kumara Kapilo Manu, Pralado Janako Bhishmo, Balir Vyasaki Vayam. So we have Swayambhu, he's the first, and this is Lord Brahma. So Swayambhu, Lord Brahma, and then Swayambhuva, his son. So in the verse, he's called Manu. He is the first Manu. And as we know, in one day of Lord Brahma, we have 14 Manus, and Swayambhuva Manu is the first. We hear a lot about the descendants of Swayambhuva Manu throughout the Srimad Bhagavatam. We're introduced to his descendants in the 3rd canto, and they go all the way up until the end of the 7th canto. So this is a lot that there is great conversation around his descendants. He is a very extraordinary personality. And although I know for myself, I feel a little bit more familiar with some of the other personalities that are named in this verse from the 6th canto about our Mahajans, but Swayambhuva Manu, I don't feel so familiar with him. So I thought for my own benefit and hopefully for the benefit of others, we speak a little bit about Swayambhuva Manu today. So we're first introduced to Swayambhuva Manu earlier in the Bhagavatam, where he's described as the son of Lord Brahma, where we hear about the creation and how everything is coming through Lord Brahma, and he is named there as the first son of Lord Brahma. Not the first son in that the sages and many other things came from Lord Brahma first, but he is the first Manu. He is the first Kshatriya. He's the great king, and he's described as the father of mankind. We have the Manu Samhita, his law books for mankind. So he is he's a very important personality, and we hear some of his qualities and character in the 3rd canto of the Bhagavatam, when he approaches Kardama Muni to give his daughter Devahuti to the great sage. And it's a very wonderful explanation of him. He is described there as all glorious. He approaches Kardama Muni, who is in his hermitage shining like the sun, and the great king, the greatest king, he comes along on his chariot and speaks to Kardama Muni about accepting his daughter. And when he approaches Kardama Muni offers his obeisances to him and begins to glorify Swayambhuva Manu. And there it's described that he didn't have to do this because he's a Brahmana and Swayambhuva Manu is a Kshatriya. But because of the wonderful qualities of Swayambhuva Manu, then Kardama Muni, he offers a much glorification to Swayambhuva Manu. And he glorifies his qualities as a Kshatriya, as the protector of the people, as a great king. And then in turn, Swayambhuva Manu glorifies Kardama Muni and then offers him his daughter. He's glorified there. Kardama Muni, he glorifies Swayambhuva Manu as a representative of the Supreme Lord. He says that he is a great king, he is self-controlled, and he is the representative of the Supreme Lord, and he is the shelter of all people. So we get a glimpse into the qualities of Swayambhuva Manu here. And then, as I mentioned, we hear about the descendants of Swayambhuva Manu. Now we're going into his sons. We've heard of the daughters of Swayambhuva Manu up to this point. Now we're going to head into the sons and then the descendants coming from the lines of his sons. And that goes all the way up until the end of the 7th canto in this conversation between Vidura and Maitreya. So in Srimad Bhagavatam, there's so many different conversations and dialogues going on. So we hear about many different pastimes of the Lord, many different episodes between the Lord and his devotees. Overall, we are hearing for a lot of the Bhagavatam, we're hearing this conversation between Vidura and Maitreya. And Vidura has inquired about the descendants of Swayambhuva Manu, and then that goes on for a very long time. So we're hearing of a very extraordinary personality. In the beginning of the 8th canto, where it shifts from speaking of the descendants of Swayambhuva Manu to we start hearing of the descendants of some other Manus who came after Swayambhuva Manu, there are a few verses there that are particularly about Swayambhuva Manu, just before it changes to hearing about different Manus. So I wanted to just go through a few of these verses. It describes the quality and the character of Swayambhuva Manu. So Swayambhuva Manu is described as the husband of Shatarupa, his wife Shatarupa. She is also born of Lord Brahma, and then they were married. So it's described there that he was not at all attached to sense enjoyment. Now, this in itself is a very glorious quality, especially for a Kshatriya king, a ruler. They have so much capacity for sense enjoyment, but he was not at all attached. He gave up his kingdom of sense enjoyment, and he entered into the forest with his wife to practice great austerities. And in the forest, he stood on one leg on the bank of the river Sunandana. And with only one leg touching the earth, he performed austerities for 100 years. So this is, we see the character of such personalities that regardless of being surrounded by all types of opulence and wealth and power, he's unattached. And this is a great lesson for all of us, even in our own little realm where we may experience some degree of opulence or some degree of power, some degree of control, even in our tiny, teeny little ways. It's very easy to become attached to that. But we see in the examples of the great devotees that regardless of their immense wealth and opulence, they remain unattached to that. Why? Because they're attached to Krishna's lotus feet. Because of that attachment to Krishna, then the attachment to material things, to their material opulence and power and wealth and position, those things are unimportant to them. They perform their duties, and we hear so much in the Shastra of great Kshatriyas, great kings, who are expert at performing their duties. So in the same way as aspiring devotees, It's our position to try and perform our duties expertly and use what Krishna is giving us in his service without becoming attached to position, power, opulence, without becoming attached to those things. And we can remain unattached to those things simply by strengthening our attachment to Krishna. Just seeing ourselves as Krishna instructs Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita. You can just be an instrument in the fight. And due to Arjuna's being that instrument for Krishna's will, for Krishna's desire, then he had immense power, immense opulence. He had all of those things. And then, as we know in the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, how it explains that all those things were withdrawn after Krishna's purpose was fulfilled. After the battle of Kurukshetra, what happened to Arjuna? He couldn't protect some ladies from some plundering thieves who came along. He couldn't do it. His opulence and his power was gone. He was to be but an instrument in the fight. This is Krishna's instruction. So in the same way, our position as living entities is to simply be an instrument for Krishna's will, for Krishna's desire, for Krishna's pleasure, for Krishna's purposes. And then whatever opulence, power, position, talent, whatever we may have that Krishna is giving us to fulfill his purposes, they're simply for that. They're just in order to serve Krishna. And then when they're not needed anymore, we'll find they won't be there. We can simply be but an instrument in the fight in life for Krishna's pleasure, for Krishna's desire. And that's the perfection of life for a devotee. Whatever Krishna wants from me, yes, I'm ready to do. I'm ready to use whatever Krishna provides me in order to serve him. And then if those things are not there anymore, okay, I'm not attached. I'm not attached to the thing, I'm attached to Krishna's service. So Swayambhuva Manu, he was like this. He was unattached to his immense opulence and power and position. And he is in the forest performing great austerities. And while he's performing austerities, he's speaking wisdom. And after, in the few verses after this, we hear the realizations of Swayambhuva Manu, which are really incredible realizations. And it's stated here in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says that while Swayambhuva Manu was in the forest performing austerities like this, and he's speaking his realizations, he's doing it softly. He's just, he's expressing his realization. So I thought in order to gain a little bit of insight into the personality of Swayambhuva Manu, we could hear a few of his realizations of devotional service, realizations of Krishna. This is from the 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. It's the first chapter, and it's texts 9 to 16. I'm not sure if we'll get through all of them, but in case you want to have a look later, those are the verses. So Lord Manu said, "The Supreme Living Being has created this material world of animation. It is not that he was created by this material world. When everything is silent, the Supreme Being stays awake as a witness. The living entity does not know him, but he knows everything. Within this universe, the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his Supersoul feature is present everywhere, wherever there are animate or inanimate objects. Therefore, one should accept only that which is allotted to him. One should not desire to infringe upon the property of others." Srila Prabhupada gives very long purports here as well. Although the Supreme Personality of Godhead constantly watches the activities of the world, no one sees him. However, one should not think that because no one sees him, he does not see. For his power to see is never diminished. Therefore, everyone should worship the Supersoul, who always stays with the individual soul as a friend. So we can see his realization, his character, his absorption in devotional service. He goes on, The Supreme Personality of Godhead has no beginning, no end, and no middle. Nor does he belong to a particular person or nation. He has no inside or outside. The dualities found within this material world, such as beginning and end, mine and theirs, are all absent from the personality of the Supreme Lord. The universe, which emanates from him, is another feature of the Lord. Therefore, the Supreme Lord is the ultimate truth, and he is complete in greatness. The entire cosmic manifestation is the body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Absolute Truth, who has millions of names and unlimited potencies. He is self-effulgent, unborn, and changeless. He is the beginning of everything, but he has no beginning. Because he has created this cosmic manifestation by his external energy, the universe appears to be created, maintained, and annihilated by him. Nonetheless, he remains inactive in his spiritual energy and is untouched by the activities of the material world. Therefore, to enable people to reach the stage of activities that are not tinged by fruitive results, great saints first engage people in fruitive activities. For unless one begins by performing activities as recommended in Shastra, one cannot reach the stage of liberation or activities that produce no reactions. Again, a very long purport from Srila Prabhupada there, explaining all about fruitive, how by performing actions we can become free from this whole cycle. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is full in opulence by his own gain, yet he acts as the creator, maintainer, and annihilator of this material world. In spite of acting in that way, he is never entangled. Hence, devotees who follow in his footsteps are also never entangled. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, works just like an ordinary human being, yet he does not desire to enjoy the fruits of work. He is full in knowledge, free from material desires and diversions, and completely independent. As the supreme teacher of human society, he teaches his own ways of activities, and thus he inaugurates the real path of religion. I request everyone to follow him. And those are the words of Swayambhuva Manu himself during his performance of austerity. Srila Prabhupada, he says in the purport to this final verse that this is the sum and substance of our Krishna consciousness movement, that we're simply requesting everyone to follow Lord Krishna, just to follow in the footsteps of the teacher of the Bhagavad Gita. And Swayambhuva Manu, as the leader of mankind, he is drawing people toward Krishna. That's his desire. He simply is requesting everyone to follow Krishna. He explains the position of Krishna, he explains the greatness of Krishna, and then induces people to follow him. And Srila Prabhupada says in Bhagavad Gita that it is important to understand the greatness of the Lord. It is important to understand how the Lord is great, because when we're convinced of the greatness of the Lord, then we are inspired to serve him. If we have misunderstandings about the position of the Lord, who he is, how great he is, then our desire to serve him is not so strong. We may fall into the trap of equating the Supreme Personality of Godhead with ourselves or with any other fallible being. So it's very important to understand the greatness of the Lord. And these verses from Swayambhuva Manu, he describes that. He's describing the greatness of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his realization after so long of performing his duties as a great king, as a great Kshatriya, giving protection to everyone. And then at the completion of his duties, he goes to perform austerities. And during the performance of austerity, he is full of realization. And this is our path in Krishna consciousness, that we may perform so many duties during our lifetime, but when we're performing our duties in connection with Krishna, in relationship with Krishna, performing them as a service to Krishna, regardless of our ashram situation or whatever circumstance we may be in, if we perform our activities in consciousness of Krishna, then, as Krishna says, then we can come to him. We can come to him because we're absorbed in him. We're fixed in consciousness, regardless of the performance of our different duties in life. I've been meditating recently a lot on this point that we go through so many different phases in life, and life changes a lot. We are, especially if you've been for some time trying to practice Krishna consciousness in different situations. So we may have started off in a single ashram, married, family grows up. We can see, we just see how life is just, it goes in so many different phases, and through all phases of life, our constant is our service for Krishna. Our constant is chanting the holy name. Our constant is the association of devotees. And you can see how the whole process of Krishna consciousness, we're going through our lifetime, and at the end we'll gain this realization of Krishna. And it's a very wonderful process that Krishna's giving us. This whole it's very applicable to all time, place, circumstance, every situation. And we can see through the Shastra, we can see so many examples of great devotees who have lived their life in Krishna consciousness, gone through so many different situations, remained firm in their conviction and in their service to Krishna, and at the end of life, go back to Krishna. So Srila Prabhupada has given us this perfect process, has explained the Shastra in such a way that we can apply this at every single stage in our life. And we can take so much inspiration from our previous acharyas, from these mahajans, these authorities in devotional service that we have to follow. And in that way remain fixed in Krishna consciousness for this lifetime and beyond. It's something that is our inherent nature. So it doesn't depend on our situation, our circumstance. And at all times, all phases of life, then we simply need to try to have that desire to remain fixed in Krishna's service. And then everything comes from that. Krishna will reveal himself to us in time, in his own time. So hearing about these wonderful descendants of Swayambhuva Manu should also give us so much inspiration. We're about to move into, from tomorrow, we'll move into beginning to hear about King Uttanapad and his wonderful son Dhruva. And we'll see Dhruva also during his whole lifetime. He lived such an incredible life, and we can gain so much inspiration from the way he surrendered himself to Krishna and also performed his duty throughout his lifetime, a very, very long life, a very, very long lifetime, as a great king, so many duties, so many responsibilities, and yet he was able to perform his duties, his responsibilities in Krishna consciousness throughout his whole lifetime. So this is a source of great inspiration for all of us to follow in the footsteps of our previous acharyas and these great authorities in devotional service. So thank you very much for your attention, and if anyone would like to share their realizations or any comments, please do. Again, sorry that I'm a little bit short, but it's almost school time. So, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srila Gurudev ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Would anyone like to add anything?
Yes, Mother, just very nice class. inspiration, Samabu Manu. In the following verses, we're going to learn more about his descendants. Thank you, Mataji, for coming and giving association.
Thank you.
Anybody else got some comments or in here? Thank you, Mataji. We'll end here. Her Grace Acyuta Bhava Mataji ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Bhakta ji, Vancha Kalpataru Vaisya,
Vishnu Vrinda ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.